From Franklin D. Roosevelt's wartime journey to Liberia to Barack Obama's emotional homecoming in Kenya, every U.S. president who stepped foot in Africa left with a story that changed them forever. Some came in search of alliances. Others came chasing peace. But a few found something far deeper, a connection with the people, the land, and the spirit of Africa itself. In this video, we uncover 10 U.S. presidents and the African countries that captured their hearts. At number 10, Franklin D. Roosevelt. Franklin D. Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States, made history in 1943 when he became the first sitting U.S. president to visit the African continent. His destination was Liberia, a country founded by freed African Americans in the early 1800s. At the time, World War II was at its peak, and Liberia's strategic importance was growing rapidly. Roosevelt's visit to Monrovia symbolized friendship, unity, and a shared story between two nations connected by history. He met with Liberian President Edwin Barclay, discussing wartime cooperation, economic development, and infrastructure projects, especially the production of natural rubber, which was critical to the U.S. military. Roosevelt was deeply impressed by Liberia's courage and independence. After his visit, he described Liberia as a symbol of freedom's endurance in Africa. For the 32nd president, Liberia was more than an ally. It was a reflection of the American spirit on African soil. At number 9, Dwight D. Eisenhower. Dwight D. Eisenhower, the 34th President of the United States, visited Morocco in 1959, one of the first North African countries to welcome an American president after gaining independence. During the Cold War, Eisenhower viewed Morocco as a key partner bridging Europe, Africa, and the Arab world. His meeting with King Mohammed V in Casablanca focused on strengthening diplomatic ties, promoting regional stability, and supporting Morocco's transition into full independence. Thousands of Moroccans lined the streets to welcome him, waving U.S. and Moroccan flags, a rare show of excitement for a foreign leader. At that time, Eisenhower admired Morocco's unity and the king's leadership, calling the nation a model of African strength and self-determination. For the 34th president, Morocco stood out as a vital ally and one of the most memorable destinations of his presidency. At number 8, Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter, the 39th president of the United States, made a historic visit to Nigeria in 1978, becoming the first sitting American president to visit sub-Saharan Africa. At the time, Nigeria was emerging as one of Africa's most powerful nations. Rich in oil and influence, and a key voice in regional politics, Carter admired Nigeria's leadership role on the continent, especially its firm stance against apartheid in South Africa and its push for African unity. During his visit to Lagos, Carter met with Nigerian Head of State General Olusegun Obasanjo. They discussed global energy issues, trade, and U.S. support for African development. Carter was warmly received by massive crowds who saw his visit as a sign of mutual respect between the two nations. He later described Nigeria as the heartbeat of Africa's progress. For the 39th president, Nigeria represented hope, a rising African power capable of leading the continent into a new era of independence and growth. At number 7, Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon, the 37th President of the United States, visited Egypt in June 1974, a trip that marked a major step in rebuilding U.S. relations with the Arab world after years of tension. His visit came just months after the Yom Kippur War, at a time when Egypt was beginning to open up diplomatically under President Anwar Sadat. Nixon's arrival in Cairo was met with massive crowds, cheering, waving flags, and welcoming him as a friend of Egypt's new direction. The two leaders discussed peace efforts in the Middle East, trade opportunities, and Egypt's growing role as a bridge between Africa and the Arab world. Nixon was deeply impressed by Sadat's courage and vision for stability. He later described Egypt as the heart of Arab Africa, a nation that carries both history and hope. For the 37th president, Egypt wasn't just a diplomatic stop. It became a symbol of peace, resilience, and one of his most memorable international visits. At number 6, Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, the 42nd President of the United States, made a historic visit to South Africa in 1998, a journey that became one of the most emotional moments of his presidency. It was just a few years after the end of apartheid, and South Africa was experiencing a new dawn of democracy under Nelson Mandela. Clinton's visit symbolized America's support for this transformation and its commitment to a freer, united Africa. During his trip, Clinton addressed the South African Parliament, praising Mandela's courage and the nation's journey toward reconciliation. He also met with communities, youth leaders, and local entrepreneurs, emphasizing education and economic growth. The warm welcome he received across the country left a deep impression. Clinton later called South Africa a beacon of freedom and forgiveness. For the 42nd president, South Africa represented hope, a nation rising from its painful past to lead the continent into a brighter future. At number 5, George W. Bush. George W. Bush, the 43rd president of the United States, developed a special bond with Tanzania during his time in office, visiting the country twice, in 2003 and 2008. Bush's visits weren't just ceremonial. They marked a major turning point in U.S.-Africa relations. He launched several life-saving initiatives, including the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR, and a major malaria prevention program, both of which transformed healthcare across Africa, with Tanzania benefiting the most. During his visits, President Bush was warmly welcomed by Tanzanian President Jakaya Kikwete, and massive crowds across Dar es Salaam schools, clinics, and hospitals funded by U.S. aid carried his name, reflecting the positive impact of his policies. Tanzanians often described Bush as the president who cared. For the 43rd president, Tanzania stood out as a country of progress, partnership, and gratitude, a place that showcased how American investment could truly change lives. At number 4, George H.W. Bush. George H.W. Bush, the 41st President of the United States, made a powerful mark in Africa through his visit to Somalia in December 1992. At the time, Somalia was in the middle of a devastating civil war and famine. Millions were suffering, and the international community was struggling to respond. Bush ordered Operation Restore Hope, a humanitarian mission to deliver food and restore order, one of the largest relief efforts in U.S. history. When he landed in Mogadishu, American troops were already on the ground, distributing aid and protecting civilians. Bush personally met the soldiers and aid workers, praising their bravery and compassion. His visit sent a strong message that the United States was willing to act, not just speak. He later described Somalia as a place where American hearts met African hope. For the 41st president, Somalia represented a mission of mercy, a moment when leadership meant saving lives, not gaining headlines. At number 3, Barack Obama. Barack Obama, the 44th president of the United States, shared a personal and emotional connection with Kenya, the land of his father's birth. In July 2015, Obama became the first sitting U.S. president to visit Kenya. His arrival in Nairobi was more than just a diplomatic event. It was a homecoming. Crowds filled the streets, waving American and Kenyan flags, cheering as the son of Africa returned as the leader of the free world. During his visit, Obama met with President Uhuru Kenyatta, business leaders, and youth innovators. He delivered a memorable speech emphasizing unity, democracy, and opportunity, encouraging young Africans to build the Africa they want. He also visited his father's village in Kogelo, where he reconnected with relatives and paid homage to his roots. Obama described Kenya as a place that helps explain who I am. For the 44th president, Kenya wasn't just a country on the map. It was home, a living symbol of heritage, pride, and how far the African dream can reach. At number 2, Donald Trump. Donald Trump, the 45th president of the United States, never made a personal trip to Africa during his time in office, but Egypt stood out as one of the African countries he strongly supported through diplomacy and defense partnerships. Throughout his presidency, Trump maintained a close working relationship with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. The two leaders met several times at global summits, including in Washington, where Trump described Sisi as a fantastic guy who's doing a great job. Under his administration, Egypt received continued U.S. military aid and cooperation in counterterrorism, regional stability, and trade. His wife, First Lady Melania Trump, visited Egypt in 2018 during her solo Africa tour, where she praised the country's heritage and culture. Although Trump never visited in person, Egypt remained one of his most favored African partners, valued for its strategic importance and long-standing alliance with the United States. Finally, at number 1, Joe Biden. Joe Biden, the 46th President of the United States, made headlines in December 2024 when he visited Angola, marking his first official trip to sub-Saharan Africa. Since taking office, Biden's visit reflected a new chapter in U.S.-Africa relations, focusing on economic growth, clean energy, and global partnerships. He met with Angolan President João Lourenço in Luanda, where they discussed major investments in infrastructure, renewable energy, and digital development under the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment Initiative. The visit also highlighted Angola's growing role as a regional power and one of Africa's fastest developing economies. Biden praised the country's progress and resilience, calling Angola a pillar of modern Africa and a partner for the future. For the 46th president, Angola wasn't just another stop on the map. It symbolized a new generation of cooperation between the United States and Africa, built on respect, opportunity, and shared progress.